Rahobat, greetings. Welcome to the Actual Fact Podcast. This is an episode brought straight to the people of the world who have been misguided and misinformed on who our mother goddess is, who the Femi-Nine is of our race, how the female plays a part, not plays a part, is the major deity, the only deity that's capable of bringing beings, prophets, angels, gods, messiahs, whatever deity is born, right? It is the Femi-Nine that's responsible for birthing these beings. And because of this, there's been a large conspiracy in the world against the female, the Femi-Nine, our goddesses incarnated, as it relates to religious doctrine and what they've taught the world for the last 6,000 years. And our job is to make sure that we set the record straight. And because of the 6,000 year spell that has been placed amongst our people, we have a duty and obligation as on this Actual Facts, right? Yes, we're back. We have a duty and obligation to make sure that the world gets this information. So I'm going to address, as we normally do, we want to thank His Excellency Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, our Heavenly Father in flesh, right, that has written over 1,500 books as on many different topics and many different subjects, many different series that will help the Nagard and Nadu race, the Black African race, in this day and time. And because we're on the countdown to the year 2030, one of the most and the clearest forms of affirmation that we have received is the upliftment of our women. It's for our people who've been lost in the religious doctrines to get clarity on who this female goddess is, who this Femi-Nine is. And for those that are just joining in, I lost the live, so we're just going to start from the beginning. Hopefully we'll catch those that have missed it, but I want to make sure that this goes out to the world. So welcome those that are joining in. And again, we want to cover several books that the Father has written as it relates to the female. One, The Planet Earth is Women, right? This is a doctrine book, Patriarchal, that teaches the women about who they are and what their responsibility is and who they are really on to us on this planet. Their physical bodies, why their physical bodies is so unique, why they are considered divine, Femi-Nine, why we have a doctrine that is a Femi-Nine doctrine, and why the world is leaning towards the transformation of a masculine, patriarchal dominated world to a Femi-Nine, femininity dominated planet, because the world needs healing. And Mother Nature is the best healer and nurturer, and that she does all her creation and yields to her creation the needs and provides the necessities of sustenance and things for us to grow and live on this planet. So when you listen to this podcast, make sure you listen all the way through, because we have a lot to cover in a short period of time. We also we're going to cover a book called The Lotus of Life, which is the Patriarchal Shalal Yanun, Pa Kadash Vanastas U, which is the Gospel of Yanun on the Sacred Femi-Nine, the Lotus of Life. We also have the Goddess Creator, which is a Patriarch as well. This is a question to men. This Goddess Creator is questioning men, the unrighteous men, on why they do the things that they've done to women, why we've subjected our women to just being sexual objects, why we have brought our women down to just being servitude or servants in the house, right? That book, Goddess Creator, is a Patriarch series. You also have the Black Book, which is a book that speaks about the mitochondria and the genetics of the Femi-Nine and how she was born male out of her, and the genetic mutations that took place, and the two creations of the masculine that you see today versus the masculine of 54,000 years ago. There's two totally different masculines. The men and the Femi-Nine that you see today are not the same ones that was born in ancient times or in an older time, where they were born hermaphrodite and hemorphodite, and over the years the X chromosome, Y chromosome began to metamorphosize into what do you call a single gender person being born from a woman, when normally she would give birth to twins. So that we'll go over that genetic discussion as well. That's covered in the Black Book. Also, what's also covered is the who is God, male or female, female or male, and 18 plus 18 plus 1, 37 genes of the mitochondria. Thank you all for tuning back in. We got cut off abruptly, but we're back on it with no problem. So let's address let's address where we want to start focusing on the Femi-Nine, on her spiritual body. We want to focus on her physical body, and the importance of her katat, the completeness of her, and the deity goddesses, the Nathartat, that are responsible for the birth of the heavenly bodies within the universes, as well as the physical bodies on the planet. Now, we did cover quite a bit, but fortunately we lost the last live, so I have to cover it again, because these individual people who are coming on, they have to have this, and they've been waiting for some time. And I'll address that question. I see your question wise. So again, let's address the Femi-Nine and her physical body. Now, we did start off, we would like to read this Black Book, right? This Black Book, just a portion of this Black Book speaks about the domination of the female coming out of the water first. And the reason why that's necessary is because there's two creations that we typically discuss on the actual facts. Our creation, which is the Incarnated creation that happened millions of years ago, when our seed was brought from Saha and Sabat, Orion and Sirius, by our Nathar and placed into the waters, and we grew out of the waters and onto land to become the humanoid beings, the dark nine ether beings that we are today, melanated, that was born in a tropical environment that was conducive to the Patriarchal, in the moist tropical sun heat genes that we were born and birthed with, right? The sun heat genes in us that attracts the sun's rays, gives us energy, and we were placed in Africa, the best part of the planet, by our ancestors. In that creation, the Femi-Nine came out of water first. She was the first to come out of water as an asexual being, right? She was the one that was able to even give birth without the aid of a male. The male Y chromosome didn't come until later. And actually 4,000 years later was man taught how to speak, when the woman was taught to speak 54,000 years ago. But there's a specific timeline on how the creation and the metamorphosis take place. Obviously, we can't condense the entire our story into one 3-hour segment, but we'll do our best to cover the basics, and hopefully we'll get a part 2 sometime in the future. I'm sure we will. So when you talk about the physical body of the Femi-Nine, right, we discussed that the right brain is right for male images, for the Femi-Nine images, and the analytical brain, the left side, is for the male analytical part of his brain. Harmoniously together, they birth the perfect creative forces that allows life to exist continuously in continuous cycles. But the Femi-Nine, because she holds the mitochondria DNA, she's a record keeper. And this is why we always protected her. Right? This is why we always protected her. And in that protection, right? In that protection, we were able to protect our race's lineage and the descendancy of the royalty by which the female protected within her genes. It's in the genome structure. And therefore, the feminine holds the records of our heavenly existence down into this, right now, to this 2025, to this very year that we're in now. The records are there in the feminine. And if the feminine was to maintain her sacred divinity and get it restored and the transformation, then we will align ourselves with the universe again, and we'll have total unison amongst our species, and we'll usher in this new 24,000 year cycle with complete clarity as deities, as gods. But the feminine, because of her responsibility as a god mixed in with other races, caused her light to become dim, and it caused her to lose her divinity by mixing her seed with other races and taking in the doctrines of other peoples or other races, images of their gods, images of their religious prophets, images of their authors, images of their authorities, and thus the feminine has lost her divinity. And that's not saying that it can't be regained, because the restoration is taking place within these actual facts and Patriarchal that the Master of Heaven and Earth is introduced to us in this 2,000 year renewal of our cycle. Now, the female holds the double helix. This is why she's so important to us, right? It's because holding that helix, that the helix of creation, and in the womb, her ability to respawn or attract the material world. She's able to attract the material world in such a way that she can grow something from what looks like nothing. Because as man had watched the feminine become pregnant, he was not partaking of that particular act. He was not watching what was taking place in the womb. So everything was magical to him because he was not able to see what is in the womb. So the sperm and the egg connecting and a baby growing from that and then being born in a body of a woman was magical and divine. But when you look at the technological advances now, when you look in space, and now they're looking into the deep pockets of the universes, they're seeing births of material bodies being born out of the womb of Nunet, out of the feminine womb of space. The same thing happens within the feminine's body. The baby is born out of the material, out of darkness, water, right? Born in water, conceived in water, and grown from the attraction that the female power has by pulling things in and creating a new world within inside of her. And this is within itself the magic of and one of the secrets of the sacred feminine. And this is why she is to remain sacred to us, because of the fact that the universe works through her. The fact that she's in tune with the moon. She has a cycle where she cleanses herself. Patriarchal gave her the ability to cleanse her body from outside, let's say, foreign invasions such as men who come into her body, and she has to cleanse herself of any type of deficient or defective genes from men, right? From men who are not the deities that we once were. And we've adopted these Adamite religious doctrines, these Islam, Christianity, Judaism, these patriarch-dominated institutions, and the mentality that we have adopted now, she's partaking that in, and she's accepting her abuse from these religious men. So the Father has given us this affirmation in order to cleanse us and make us aware and respect, and also respect the feminine, and respect her divinity, and understand that she was not created out of man, that she was here first, that man comes from woman. Like I said before, the Father's mentioned plenty of times, woe man or woman, man comes out of woman. Lad comes out of lady. He comes out of she. Right? So these facts as it relates to the genetics of the feminine, and that the Y is a broken X, which was a part of the genetic experiment that took place within the amongst the Nathar and the Anunnaki that were breeding this new breed, this new creation, using the primates on the planet in order to genetically breed this worker, which is where your Genesis story picks up. They had to be born out of a Femi-Nine who offered her womb, known as Nenti or Sekhmet in ancient Mekmet, right, with ancient Egypt, and they altered the X chromosome and removed genetic material from it to create the Y. This is the breeding process that took place in the Adamite story, not the creation of our ancestors who were born out of water millions of years ago, and we didn't have the defective gene that was used in the Adamite genetic engineering. We had a YXY or XYX, depending on the beings, on how they were born, right? Because there were many types of deities or Nagardanet who were born in that time, right? They were born, some hermaphrodites, some hemorphidites, some were born with obviously twins, which was the most common way or the most effective biological design for the Femi-Nine, having two breasts. When you see animals with, let's say, 6 nipples, then they typically have 6 animals. When you see piglets, 12, sometimes they have 12 piglets. The Femi-Nine was supposed to have 2 in her natural state. But what we're talking about is the masculine that you see today. The African, or the Africans of the diaspora, the Negroid males that you see today, we have that defective gene that comes out of the breeding that took place thousands of years ago. So prior to that, the Femi-Nine didn't need a male to copulate. She was able to come from the Bartholin gland, which was able to secrete the chromosome of where she could impregnate herself. And this happens amongst many species. This is not something new, right? So there's what you call asexual pregnancy that takes place. Literally happens with the Femi-Nine. Let's say this, she wasn't a Femi-Nine, she was a hermaphrodite who actually gave birth to hermaphrodite twins without even having sex. So this is science that is now being uncovered with the various understanding of genes and looking into the genome structures that our Femi-Nine holds in their records, stemming down. They're able to line or record the genetics all the way back to as far as you can go to the oldest living descendant. And this was discussed in episode 1, right, where we discussed, and episode 2. Check those out. But let's get into what the father's explaining here. As he explained in this particular book, I want to show you again, Ancient Signs of Speech. This is a master secret, right? The Ancient Signs of Speech. Also, Other, which is another master secret, number 9. This is a part of our Femi-Nine doctrine, right? That you can request in the email. Also, you have this one, Mitochondria DNA, right? Who is God, female or male? 18 plus 18 plus 1. And also the Lotus of Life. So we'll go through, I'll be pulling from these particular actual facts so you can see how the Father is restoring the Femi-Nine. And this is important for all those that want to uplift their daughters, their wives, their aunts, their mothers, their grandmothers. This is the doctrine of our culture. The Adamite doctrine removed the elimination of the God of us. Our goddess was the Femi-Nine. They removed the Femi-Nine's position in religion and subjected her to the rules of Patriarchal Islam, subjected her to the rules of Hebrew doctrine, where the woman steps to the back, 2 steps to the back, 2 steps to the right. Also, as many subjugating doctrines around the world that wants to control the beauty of the woman, wants to control how she looks, wants to control what she wears, wants to control how she speaks, wants to control all of the things about her because of her power. And once that power is restored, then our nation as a whole can rise, because we're the only men that are teaching the restoration of women. Most men are out to obtain more control over women by subjecting them to the authority of the religious monotheistic doctrines, subjecting them to the Torah, subjecting them to the Quran, subjecting them to the face veil, subjecting them to the Sharia laws where women now can't even drive without the escort of a man, where women are seen less as important as witnesses as it relates to men. This is in their Quran. This is in their doctrine. But the Father has something totally, he's uncovering the secrets of the sacred feminine within these texts, and we're going to go through it. So when it comes to the secret meaning, now the feminine does have a secret number. Not only is her number 9, it's also 1,000. And that 1,000 represents, when you look at the 1,000, other, he makes reference to this 1,000 as a number with 3 zeros representing space, time, right, and matter. So when he speaks about 1,000 in ancient times, the space, which is a 0, which is masa in the Misbatia, our language, or a Shanan circle, this circle is the everlasting circle of existence. So she has that as one of her numbers, this 0, right? And it's 3 there in the number 1,000. When you see those 3 numbers, those 3 zeros, 1,000, you'll see that the 1 and those 3s represent the body, the womb, the space, and then matter growing from a primordial soup of dark matter or dark energy. The feminine as a universal being, the same replicates itself within space when bodies or material worlds are born from this primordial whole or primordial void, and you call it the universe, you call it cosmological bodies, you call it billions and billions of stars. You say planets are born and life forms are in many different diverse solar systems and galaxies and areas of space that are yet to be explored. How did they get there? Why are stars still being born now? How is it that every time you see a creation taking place, it happens as a circle? This is the chosen symbol or geometrical figure of Panatharu. They choose the circle because it's perfect in the orb, and it's perfect in the gestation in the womb of the mother for 9 months. It's perfect in the 9 billion years of creation of the suns, in space, and the universes. There's 9 periods always in this particular cycle. 9 months, 9 billion years for existence. 9 to the 9th power 9 is the highest of all numbers. So this feminine embodies that within the womb. And so that center point, which you call black energy, or that sacred dot, and the expansion and the growth of the baby being born out of the garden into the world from darkness into light, is the same thing that happens within the universal mothers of existence. Our Nathartat in the etheric world gives birth to the universal bodies. So the feminine principle is necessary for all material matter to come into existence. So this has to be known. Not the only first story you get of a woman is with Eve, and she so-called partakes of a fruit and so-called deceives man, and all of a sudden all of man is blamed, not blaming one woman for the fall of all of existence. You could tell the disproportionate of punishment because from one so-called sin Eve allegedly had committed, which is found out to be a lie. That wasn't the story. That wasn't the case of the story when you read it. He's blaming women and the cursing man, cursing the ground, cursing the serpent, cursing, bringing evil and enmity, doing all these things for one so-called sin that they claim Eve committed. Now, Eve is responsible for all of this. How is that possible? You're not blaming the devil for it, you're blaming women. So they intentionally introduce in the Adamic monotheistic religion the hate of women, and that women were the downfall of all of creation of men, so men could have someone to blame. Anything that they're responsible for, right? Anything that they're responsible for, anything that they've done evil, right? Guess what they're doing? They're blaming women. Well, if women wouldn't have done this, if you wasn't supposed to be doing it, so they use that as a clutch. This is the abuse that has been given to our woman. So now, when the Father speaks about this, her secret number, right, and her magic powers, this is what the religious world wanted to control. And so they reversed it by saying that man came from that woman came from man, and they made up a ridiculous story of creation, that this being came down and shaped man in his image after his likeness, and then blew his breath into this man, and this man became a living soul, and then put him to sleep and took the rib, right? But what they're not telling you is that this God said that it's not good for man to be alone, which is a confession. Right? Meaning that how did he know that it's not good for man to be alone when he was alone, according to religion, his whole existence? Right? In order to feel alone, you had to have company. In order to know that it's not good, you have to know what is good. Was it good to have company? Did God also have according to religion, have a wife or have a woman? How did he know that it's not good to be alone? That means it is good to be in company. That means that someone was there with this being, either departed, left, divorced, or what have you. Then he said, it's not good that you alone. Why not? You alone for all an eternity. So they actually acknowledge the feminine by that main statement, and the fact that their God knew what type of being Adam would need. Right? Hi, I see your question. Someone asked that question about OSM. I see a question. Right? What happened is, he's confessing that in order to make man feel good, you need a woman. You need a woman to be complete. I had a woman and I became alone, and it's not good, so I don't want you to be alone as my creation, so I'm going to give you this woman. So these are confessions that the monotheistic religious world knows about the feminine, and that they were the gods that were on the planet closest to our overseers, because they were responsible for giving birth to all of your prophets, all of your messiahs, all of your so-called religious clergy, your holy men, your Yahshuas, your Abrahams. What happened to the feminine of these doctrines? The reason they eliminated them is because the patriarch control of the Adamites overlords, they introduced it to you and your system and your society, and it had cut off the feminine's connection to the divine, because she does not see herself anywhere where they worship her image. They don't have the image of the feminine anywhere for your daughters to look up to. They don't have the images of the feminine for your wives or your grandmothers or your mothers to look up to. They didn't have that. So they're looking at other races that are doing so-called better in a way, because their men control the resources, and that they appear richer in their countries and in their cultures, and in that they make sure that their feminine are taken care of. Meanwhile, the Adamite, with his doctrines of male chauvinism, has created a society that men have subjected the women to their rule. Now all of the women are mostly frustrated. They're complaining. They have nothing to look forward to in the future. They don't see security. They don't see stability. They don't see economic prosperity. They don't see that amongst the religious men, because we're walking and worshiping other races and other people's gods. So you left a woman on the wayside, and this doctrine that the Father has placed in these particular books for you to have is needed for this day and time and in the future. So he's showing us the importance in these books, and I'm going through some of the skills that they were given, the feminine, in order to use them effectively for the growth of her race and her people, right? So, and he warns the feminine, don't misuse these skills. Okay, so dance is one. Singing, if you notice, dance and singing, they pretty much go together. Singing and dancing, women do that very, very well. Love making, which is an art and a science. There's a science and an art to this. There's a science to love making. There's a science to sex. And the feminine's erogenous zones that men are not aware of. because of the again, the ego dominating the sexual activity, right? Because we have lost interest of the female's body, though we love her body, just making her pleased, right? Because we've reduced her down to her being our sexual object, then we no longer want her to be pleased. So a lot of the abuse that we have been taught by the Adamite, we filter right into our families. We treat them with, we treat right into the feminine in a way that it's what we say, or that's it. And that's even in the sexual aspect, and we're overlooking that her pleasure and how she's pleased makes her 9 times better as a feminine in her productivity, even in her spirituality and her mental health, all of that. And if her sexual areas, if she's pleased the right way, and she maintains a healthy orgasm, and men are not selfish with her in bed, a woman can reach heights that we only can imagine. And this is an actual fact. This is the science, that her body is genetically designed to because she's an she attracts, and as an attraction being, she's going to attract what she needs and what she wants in order to maintain the circle of life of existence. That's how she's able to attract the matter to shape a baby. Where does the matter come from? People say it comes from food, they come from this. They don't know how the body of the baby is being shaped. And she does that when she attracts the male. And with that power, she has the power to create a situation where the male is more reproductive for the family, that he reaches his highest standard, and he reaches his highest potential. And we go through that, but that lovemaking is a part of one of her skills. 4, playing music. 5, skills of sport. 6, building. 7, sewing. 8, healing. She's a healer as well. The feminine heals. If you ever, the first place you go when you're sick, you want to lean on your mother. So in her body, there's a healing effect that she has there. She has to teach. The woman teaches the child first. As she's relating to the baby in the interaction and the baby's early development, the baby is learning from the mother, right? She is your first teacher. She is your first provider. She is your first God. Outside of the religious doctrines, you don't read a Quran, you don't read a Bible, you don't read any of those books first. She is your first God. So as a healer, she's your first healer. She will heal you and bring you back to health. If you allow our mothers, our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, they had medicine formulas for us prior to the Mukaso and the Adamites world. We went to them for healers. And then they made them evil by calling them witches. They were teachers. You have 10. Weaving. Did I say weaving? Yes. 11, carving. 12, writing. Right? 13, cooking, creating, mathematics, chemistry, tongues, and sewing. So these are the 18 skills of the feminine that she must perfect, right? And be introduced to, and be in a position, we have to place her in a position where she can develop those skills and not have to do both parts. As a father and mother, male and female, a lot of times our women are left to fend for themselves and can't exist in their femininity the way that natural nature has designed. That's for us to do. For men, the men to provide and protect that, and create an environment for her to thrive the way she's supposed to for the future, the continuation of our records, right? So that when the Father explains that the DNA was brought to the planet, He says that 12 females and 12 males were allowed to stay on the planet to mix and breed the new Mukwanu being, who were born as twins. Right? Born as twins. Each female birthed a son and a daughter. Before this was perfected, the first offspring were conjoined twins and hermaphrodite deities and hemorphodite. Hermaphrodite and hemorphodite deities. Right? Hermaphrodite is we all know what hermaphrodites are. Hermaphrodites are beings that are born with both genders. And when you say hermaphrodite, you're saying this particular morphodite is female or her because it menstruates. That's the only difference between the two. between a hemorphodite and hermaphrodite. Hemorphodite doesn't menstruate. Hermaphrodite does menstruate. This is how certain beings were born prior in the divine state of our original existence, being coming out of water, coming from asexual beings. And like I said before, the Father has mentioned this plenty of times in several books, that you are, and scientists know this, this is a biological fact, it's not anything off chart. The baby is a neutral gender for the first 3 months. That means male and female share the same body. So that shows you that gender is not necessarily in spirit or just in body. Let's say that. Because what is the spirit? What is the gender of a spirit? Right? It's different from the gender of a body. Why do I say this? Because that, like we discussed, there's hormonal secretions that take place during the first embryo, the first trimester, that affects the baby's outcome and how it will grow and what gender it will become. Sometimes if traumas affect the woman, or traumas affect the stress affects the woman, then it can affect the baby, and a baby can be born with a different spirit from the body that is possessed by, meaning that it can have a female spirit and male body, male spirit. And this is done through many factors: our environment, food, drugs, as well as, so like we discussed, that the feminine was often taken in ancient times and placed in an environment where the baby could be in a peaceful environment. It was no extra stress factors. The male wasn't necessarily engaged in everyday life. It was not something that he understands when it comes to the pregnancy, though he is affected by it. The hormonal clashes and the emotional clashes can affect the baby and traumatize the baby early, and those are things that the ancients knew that wasn't healthy for a newborn child. So they would separate the mother, and that's why it says it takes a village to raise a child, because the mother, aunties, etc. was around that would assist. So this breeding took place with the 12 feminine from Sabat and the 12 masculine from Sa'at, which is Orion. Then they were brought here and allowed to breed and breed us as in the Garden of race, as well as coming out of the waters. But this feminine, right, in her divinity, she would give birth to twins. Now you don't see that much. It's an amazing thing to have twins. And these were more, so before that, like I said, they were born as both genders. They were known as Muknash Tatu and Muknash U, which are hermaphrodites and hemorphrodites. And these beings actually that were born that way, right? They were born in a way where they were combined mentally and spiritually with both worlds. They would vibrate these dual genders, right? The same way you were in the womb of the mother as a neutral gender. They would that conception or birth they would go all the way through neutral gender. They wouldn't split at the 3rd month. Like doctors would say, come back, we'll tell you the sex of the baby. Because that means that there will be a split. The clitoris will become elongated. The testicles or the ovaries would drop and become testicles. Right? The ovaries would drop and become testicles, or the ovaries would drop or become testicles, or the ovaries would stay in, and the clitoris wouldn't become elongated. It would just be the feminine as she is. So that's what took place in the womb. Neutral gender went all the way through. Hermaphrodites were born, and these were the beings that was considered. Sorry, I'm just doing this on this computer. Okay, so yeah. Let's get back to that. So these beings were born in a particular way where they will be vibrating in both worlds and receive. A lot of them will be used as oracles, obviously, because they wouldn't be engaged with sex, because they wouldn't have either sex organs, and they would be used for oracles, set aside for spiritual. Protected in environments for spiritual impressions. Oftentimes they would get messages from Panatharu and give them to human beings, and some of them people would say, well, let's make it. That's where they get the word, where they try to create a eunuch, where they would eliminate the sex organs to prevent sexual desires. But it was easier for a naturally born hermaphrodite or hemorphodite because the sexual desires will be limited, obviously because of the sex organs and because of the genetic height that they had and the connection to both worlds. And these beings will come from this heavenly abode, and the females, Femi-Nines, will give birth to them. Some hermaphrodites do give birth, right? There's a story of a hermaphrodite that gave birth that never had sex. So they do have that in the Bartholin gland. They do have that ability. So you'll see that there, right? So these males and females in the star systems in our creation, right, came down and bred this Nagardanet-U, or this African seed that came onto water. Over the years, 54,000 years ago, the Femi-Nine began to speak. Certain adjustments were made in the Femi-Nine in order for her to have a conversation. And you'll find that in this book here. What is this? Ancient Science of Speech. The father speaks about that in the very first words, where first pages, where he speaks about the 54,000 years ago cycle, parthenogenesis, exactly. 54,000 years ago, Shamutat, or 54,000 Shamutat years ago, that the Nathar, right, overseers caused the Ashashu females larynx to structure at the upper of the trachea, or to form a voice box capable of articulation. So this was done 54,000 years ago with the Femi-Nine. When you go down to verse 9, it was 4,000 years ago later that the female taught males this secret, and they began to speak. So men spoke after the Femi-Nine, women spoke first. Man has the analytical left part of the brain, the Femi-Nine has the imagery right part of the brain. So when you speak about, when we discuss this and how this Femi-Nine energy and this doctrine is going to transform her, it's also going to transform the world, because the world, as we discussed, needs a healing, and this renewing that is taking place. The old world is going out and this new world is coming in. The masculine images, the analytical part of his brain, and the areas that was responsible for, in his time of rule, he used it for destruction, used it to make bombs, used the metal to make a weapon, and instead of a spoon or a cooking utensil like the Femi-Nine. Then the question comes in, Adam's apple, please explain that. Now, okay, it's two stories of the Adam's apple. The Adam's apple, the reason they call it an Adam's apple is because this is what this crazy story. It's funny though. This religion for you though. They said when Adam partook of the fruit, they assumed it was an apple. When he partook of the fruit, a piece of it got stuck in his throat, and it stayed there, right? Because according to him, he wasn't supposed to eat it, so it stayed there, got stuck in his throat, and that's been that way since then, right? The Adam's apple. That's what they said. But the Father makes it clear in this Ancient Signs of Speech. You see that? Let's read verse 3. We read verse 3. It was 54,000 Shamutat years ago that the Nathar overseers caused the Asha'u females, right? The Asha'u females larynx to structure at the upper of the trachea, or to form a voice box capable of articulation. So they structured the trachea in the upper part so she could articulate, because the trachea is responsible. I'm going to answer that question, Wise. You put me on the spot, but I'll get to it. Just before we close, I'll answer that, okay? So it says the genetic alteration caused the voice box to lower. So it was the genetic alteration of the Femi-Nine that caused the voice box to lower because they wanted the articulation. They wanted her to speak, right? The Taza's vibrations enables them to produce Sawa'at's voices or sounds. So it's the vibration of the trachea that causes the sound. But what happens is in verse 7, it says that the Panatharu, this is the true story of the Adam's apple because you asked, so I'm reading it right here. The Natharu overseers adjusted her Mixzab chromosomes in her DNA strands so that the larynx began to lower itself. So they have genes that allow specific body parts to be designed to move and even form in a specific area that you choose. So this genetic alteration caused it to lower. It says, and the Asha female begins to be able to express herself with vocabulary and articulate Tashar order at emotions by Madat at words and sounds and voice structure. It was 4,000 Shamut at years later that the female taught males this secret and they began to speak. It was adjusted in the Ayashu male's throat. So the female had it, began to lower her trachea so she could articulate. It created a voice box. She taught this secret to men, and as a result of this, Tabru's projection of cartilage in the front of the throat appeared. Unlike females, he had a defect. So it was the defect as the years went, the defect caused the protrusion in the male. Though the genes was altered in the female to be able to articulate, later as the male came out and out of the Femi-Nine, the defect caused this protrusion in the throat. So this is the real reason, not what they call an Adam's apple. This is how scientists, you know how ridiculous they are with their explanation that an apple got stuck in the throat and it really literally caused a genetic mutation to cause the throat trachea to protrude. No, that's just misinformation. So I hope that answers your question. Now, that's where he speaks about the Father speaks about the woman being able to speak first and man coming out of her. Okay, so after the Adamite creation, the Femi-Nine of our race began mixing with the Adamite seed, and the planet Earth's women speaks about that, right? When he speaks about why the woman was able to or mixed her seed. Let me go over this real quick in the planet Earth's women, right? You'll see what happened, right? It says, this is planet Earth's women. The beasts of the fields they roamed and killed wicked in their very nature. It says, and in those days many mortal women called Femi-Nine were tempted by the strength and the wildness of this Homo canine, human simian full of muscles and muscular bodies. They were called masculine, and Panatharu looked on at these interactions between Femi-Nine and the masculine, number 9, and they birthed a kind of a man, mankind, man's kind, man's kin. 10. They roamed the caves, being called cavemen, the hillsides with goats, hillbillies, and many climbed up into trees. So it says, therefore Panatharu was wrathful against the mortal women who laid with the beast man. She lost her divine powers and insight because hers was the responsibility to reject the human beast with and without, that she might bring forth children of black skin, clean, unspotted, with coiled or barred hair as theirs, unlike the beast of the earth. So as you see, the planet Earth's women describes what took place and how the Femi-Nine had lost their godhood or lost their divinity by mixing in. And it doesn't mean that the Femi-Nine can't transform back. They just have to be cleansed. Fortunately, the Femi-Nine does have in her body, she does have a cleansing mechanism, which is a menstrual cycle that allows all the impurities of her blood to be removed through her vaginal orifice every 28 days, which is in line with the moon. So she's in tune more so with the universe than men. Men are more mental. You are a mental men, men, right? Tal. You're a mental being, right? So you are from the heavenly abode, from the mental abode. So you're not physically complete because you haven't manifested in the material world as a complete being. You are a mental being, and the mind is supposed to assist in the creation of the material world by combining both sides of this brain, the brain, the conscious mind of all, and through masculine and feminine energies that are necessary for all creation, not just the physical human beings on the planet, but the material world as a whole. So the principle of masculine and feminine, as we went over in episode 8, the doctrine of gender by Tahuti, speaks about both principles necessary, but because the mother, as the material manifester, or man infest her, right? Man infesting her so she can materialize, right? This is what happens. As man infests, she materializes whatever being through her attractive power. So this is why this is the power of the feminine. Well, they were attracted. The question is, why did they choose to mix? Well, as you hear, it says they were attracted to these beings. They became attracted. The femininity became attracted by the opposite. So out of this femininity energy came this masculine, wild, brute, whatever type of man, this canine man. It says by the strength and wildness of this homo canine, full of muscles and muscular bodies. So they became attracted to this being, which caused them to mix. Just because she's attractive. She's an attractive energy. So that's what happens. So as you go further down, it says her offspring was able to walk in the rays of the sun. But what happened is, he said, instead she mixed with the beasts, and their children could not walk in the rays of the sun for fear of death and the living dead carcass, dead flesh. And because of the mixture by Nenti, so that's the mixture we talked about with the Adamite project, her new breed tried to speak yet had a lisp. So it's the feminine's responsibility is great, right? In her divine power, her responsibility becomes responsible for all human beings. And that's what God does. But God has an ability to respond. So though the feminine has lost her power in her restoration, she has to take on a greater responsibility because she has to heal her children. And a part of healing the children, you have to recognize the trauma and abuses that the men have imposed on her through the religious doctrines. And the only way to cleanse that is through these actual facts. So we're going through these small facts that we found because the books are pretty lengthy. So what I did was pull out the most prevalent information that could be relayed to the average person that is just tuning in and just trying to learn and digest where we are. Then we'll get into the more advanced stuff as we move further in further episodes. But what he said was, the father said Patriarchal became wrathful against the woman because of that. Yes, so I'm glad that's clear. So now the stages, the reason, another major reason why the feminine is so divine is because she uses the sacred circle in her creation. The sacred circle, right, represents, excuse me, the Shanad, which is the circle. It represents also space, and also the circumference of the planet, or the circumference of the orb, or the circumference of the body that she's forming, which is also in a circle. So as it whirls, this is the magic that takes place that we discussed. It creates a whirlwind. It creates a new world spin. The planet Earth spins. In the womb, the baby spins. In space, circular or celestial bodies spin around a particular axis. The feminine is the same way. She has the same method within her being. Males, you don't have that. You're external, right? You're a giver, right? That's why it says push. The female receives, right? And so the centrifugal and centrifugal forces of the universe are done the same way. When you look at the pushing and pulling, which is magnetism, which is balance. The feminine, and because she uses the orb, which is a sacred symbol of Panatharu, orbs have no angles and no imperfections. Angles have imperfections. Geometry have imperfections. The orb or the circle has no imperfections because she's the perfected being, right? She is complete in pregnancy, and 9 months in pregnancy shows that she is complete. So this is a part of that her existence that has been lost, that we're reintroducing. I hope you all are enjoying what we have. Any other questions? Okay, so let's move forward because it's a lot of science. Let me read this section here in the M other, right? M other circle of existence. It says, with the feminine, okay. Excuse me. He says that, the Father says that, so you have 24,000 times to be perfected through your actions, or your Muslafu ancestor do something to help you in humanity. The accomplishments doesn't have to be really big, like the accomplishments George Washington Carver, who was so great and discovered so many different uses for the peanut that benefit people today. He will not have to reincarnate. So he's talking about the reincarnation. I'm going a little further. Oh, let me go back to this part. Sorry, I moved a little bit too far. Let's get to this circle. So the perfect number, yeah, that's what I wanted. The perfect high number of the one supreme being, mother's being, is 1,000, M other, as 999 plus 1. That is to say, Sabaeans, 999 plus 1 for unity. The one being that creates all others as M others, which is 1,000, for Mother Nature. Or you could say the first symbol in Mukmatu Safafat, Egyptian hieroglyphics, is 999, or 9 to the 9th power of 9. Natural nature, infinite rule, 9th to the 9th power of 9. The female Femi-Nine is 9 as a complete being. So her secret number is 1,000, right? And her because of her hereditary, her H-E-R, hereditary, you see the word there, right? And because she passes it on in the records. So that's why the divine is there for the 1,000 as well as 999. All of that takes place within her physical body. So let's get into the deities that we want to acknowledge as the supreme feminine creators that we see as the 9 mother goddesses they're known as. You see at Tumtet 1, you see Nuntet, 2 Hatet, 3, 4 Kaktet, 5 Amuntet, 6 Tafafnatet, 7 Natat, 8 Ashtet, 9 Nabatet Hatet. These are the Mukmanu or the Abduas, like I said, the feminine coming out of the water. You know you come from water because you're born in water. This is already a known fact. That's already clear. So when the feminine gave birth to these beings, these sun heat gene beings, they were able to absorb the sun rays and as batteries re-energize themselves daily. So the feminine, when she mixed in with the human beast, it causes the genes on there to become diluted with the Adamite's blood, and it affected the records. The same way if you put a scratch on a record, remember the vinyl records that you used to see or people used to play? If you put a small scratch, it'll skip. and then you won't get the full message. That's the same thing that happens in the records of the mitochondria. When an outside gene from a foreign invader comes in, it causes a skip in the genes, and you can actually skip the divine process of passing on the divinity to the child. It skips over, and the message is not complete. Therefore, you have an incomplete being, and that's the science behind it. So this is why it's important for her to maintain her being cleansed inside out, and make sure that her womb, right, is clear of any foreign host outside of her frequent, her let's say, harmonious frequency that comes from her masculine of her race. Yes. So it says, excuse me. Okay. So what happens in the womb? What happens in the womb of the feminine, we're going through some of her divine powers. The vacuum or ball shape in the universe being grows, attracts material into a world, like we just discussed. The womb attracts matter or sperm to a world, to become a world. It expands and grows in space. So does the new baby, like a nebula, right? So as the nebula look in space, it grows. Same thing, same principle happens. The nebula universe is the embryo universe. What happens in space happens in the womb. 1 hydrogen, 2 helium, 6 carbon, 7 nitrogen, 8 oxygen. 1 plus 2, right? Hydrogen plus 2 is helium, plus carbon is 6. The 6th element, which is carbon. 7 is nitrogen, 8 oxygen. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 6 is 9, plus 17 is 16, plus 8 is 24. This is the 24 cycles, the 24-hour period, what do you call it? Time zones, 24,000 miles, right? Every 1,000 miles a new time zone, right? So within the mother, there's that 24,000 circular cycle again. Right? So when you see this, the feminine is linked to the universe through that process, through math. And the perfection is the circle, not the angles, which is the square, which came after the circle. Though they are equal, circle and the square are equal, the square can have an angle that's imperfected, as opposed to a circle, you don't have that, which is the feminine. So the 9 daughters, these are the 9 daughters of natural nature, the original mother goddesses. This is because you hear about God, Father God, etc., but you don't hear about the mother goddesses, which is Reyetet, the original mother goddess. Reyetet. Reye is son, Reyetet is the feminine principle of this universe, who from her center, Reyetet center, 9 daughters were born from her. These are your 9 creator mother goddesses. Take note. I'm not talking about the ones I just read, right? I'm not talking about them. I read 8 earlier, right? Let's go back. Where we read the Incarnated 9. No, this is different. This is a different group. This is a different group of beings, feminine, that's coming from Reyetet. And Reyetet, the great mother, right? What she did was, she developed out of her one body, she developed the other universes from the omniverse. So out of the great mother Reyetet was born other universes, and she gave birth to these great daughters. They call them the great mothers, or the 9 daughters of creation. 1 is Ma'at, which is harmony, the first one. 2 is Nith. She represents creativity. 3 is Fatawaret. She's the protectress, right? You have 4, Hatat Harartat. That's attraction. She represents attraction. Surkat represents breath. 6, Sakamtat represents strength. Subject, healing. Nakakbatat, eternity. 9, Shashat records records, right? Shishat or Sishat or Sashat represents records, and that's 9. So you have those 9 beings there, right? When you go to these so those are the 9 that are born out of the omniverse, create multiverses, and then those deities. Now, when I'm saying deities, don't think the physical, just physical bodies. No, because without their bodies, they're still etheric beings who give birth to have the ability to create worlds the same way the Femi-Nine still creates worlds as a baby. A baby, a body is an entire universe. When you look at the infinitesimally small DNA, the workings of the cells, the various systems of the body, 11 systems, when you look into it microscopically, it is in the trillions and trillions of cells. These are all orbiting, thinking, conscious bodies. Well, when you look in the universe, the same process. There's billions and trillions of stars that our deities have given birth to as well. The names of these deities I just read, and they represent particular principles of existence: harmony, creativity, protectress, attraction, breath, strength, healing, eternity, records, right? This is the nine daughters of Reyete. And so, in understanding that, you understand the list of Femi-Nine deities that are responsible for the growth of their children. They're responsible for particular areas of your life that they control, right? That's why the Femi-Nine, once you attune yourself with your ancestors and you begin to pray and chant, the mitochondria of your line will assist the Femi-Nine, raise her up back to her glory with the actual facts, rekindling and respawning her mental. The reasoning aspect of her brain is the creative part of the mind. This is how Femi-Nine create. They literally create the child from reasoning. They birth the child. Women right now, they will tell you, I thought of how my child was to become. I thought of how I wanted her hair, how I wanted her face, how I wanted her to have her dad's eyes, but my hair, etc. They will tell you that. And you look at them like, wow, but this is the creative part of the Femi-Nine that religion has eliminated. The Femi-Nine hasn't used it in so long because the attack on her divinity comes from the world saying she's responsible for the evil. So it creates an insecurity in the minds of our daughters. And we have to do that as men. As I said before, as the Father told us before, as men, we have to acknowledge the abuses that has been perpetrated against the woman from our doing, from the religious world and the control that you want to have over God. They know if you control God, then you control the creation. Right? If you want to control man, all you have to do is control the woman. Because the man his biggest motivator is for women. His biggest motivator is pleasing his mother, right? Growing up, he watched his father do certain things and make sure he took it out, and he wanted to make sure his mom was happy, right? But in that, these are the motivating areas that the Femi-Nine has, that control and the energy she has, because as we just read before, that she knows that though man could subdue her physically, that his weakness for her is the desires he has, and her knowledge in that would allow her to use that as power, but for the benefit to move the man to higher achievements for the greater of everyone. And so, yeah, Rahobat, those that are tuning in, any other questions? Let me know. So let's continue. Okay, so the Adamite, let's go over some of these things that the Adamite, the Caucasoid, has done, right, in his abuse, right, in his abuse against humanity. And the overlords of the Anunnaki, these beings of Genesis, of Mesopotamia, introducing their patriarch dominating doctrine to modern day societies. The women have caught all of the